Board of Public Education legislative meeting. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to please turn off all cell phones or pagers or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise to salute the flag? As is our tradition and procedure before the legislative meeting, we would like to recognize students and employees of the Pittsburgh Public School District. I'd like to ask board members to please come forward, and I will turn this portion of our meeting over to Ms. Heather Hobson.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. This evening, we are presenting the first Distinguished Achievement Awards of the 2013-14 school year. Before the school year was even underway, a group of Pittsburgh public school students expanded their educational horizons overseas and embarked on a learning adventure. 5 students received scholarships from the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh to participate in an international exchange program. The program provided them with a deeper understanding of how to communicate across cultural, racial, and linguistic borders. Over the course of 4 to 5 weeks, the students explored the arts, immersed themselves in the native languages, participated in community service projects, and visited significant historical sites while living with host families. Pittsburgh Perry student Raina Bradley visited Spain to explore community service and 3 cultures. And she's here with her family today. And our students, as you can see, are joined by their supportive families who are very supportive in their educational endeavors, allowing them to travel overseas. Pittsburgh Carrick's Chelsea Garchant headed to Argentina for a community service and great outdoors program. Pittsburgh Science and Technology 6 through 12 student Justin Harden obtained a scholarship to participate in a peace, arts, and culture program in Korea. Joshua Patton from Pittsburgh-Brashear, who's here with his family as well as his principal, Principal Safran, visited Peru and followed in the footsteps of the Incas. And Pittsburgh SciTech's Jordan Tyler spent the summer in Italy experiencing the sights and sounds and immersing himself in the culture. These students are among 1,000 other high school students across the United States and abroad participating in specially designed programs. Locally, 35 of the 103 scholars to date have been from Pittsburgh Public Schools. Now, this concludes our Distinguished Achievement Awards, but we are asking the board to remain for 2 special presentations. This evening, we are honored to be joined by Ms. Ruth Modzelewski, and she's a breast cancer survivor and employee at the Susan G. Komen Foundation. The foundation began when Nancy Brinker promised her dying sister, Susan G. Komen, she would do everything in her power to end breast cancer forever. In 1982, that promise began Susan G. Komen for the Cure and launched the global breast cancer movement. Today, Susan G. Komen is the boldest community, fueling the best science and making the biggest impact in the fight against breast cancer. Thanks to events like the Komen Race for the Cure, almost $2 billion has been invested to fund groundbreaking research, community health outreach, advocacy, and programs in more than 50 countries. In observance of National Breast Cancer Month in October, the Pittsburgh Board of Education will adopt the following resolution during this evening's meeting. Ms. Modzelewski, you can walk through the line, and this is a resolution that's going to be adopted later. A resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh recognizing Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, whereas breast cancer affects 1 in 8 women in the United States, and whereas breast cancer is second only to lung cancer and cancer deaths among women in the United States, and whereas breast cancer knows no boundaries with respect to age, religion, race, and socioeconomic status and affects everyone, not only the person diagnosed with the disease. And whereas support for research and treatment of breast cancer is a paramount of paramount importance. And so the board, again, will resolve this resolution and adopt it later in the meeting. So we're also honored, you might recognize that we have a pretty full house this evening. We're here to honor Hazel Marie Attenborough Sikowski. Now, she's a former Pittsburgh Public Schools student who will celebrate her 103rd, yes, you heard me right, 103rd birthday this Saturday. This year, this year, she will receive a long-awaited birthday present, an honorary high school diploma. You see, Ms. Sikowski attended South High School when the Great Depression struck our city and the rest of the nation. She was in the 11th grade at the time and had no other choice but to leave school and go to work to support her family. Although no longer in school, she continued to learn. As she states, feeding a family during the Great Depression certainly is the greatest lesson in math, social studies, and history. Born in 1910, she lived on the South Side her entire life. She attended Humboldt School and later Birmingham School. After leaving South High School, she worked at West Penn Hospital, where she spent the next 45 years. She cared for her parents and other family members during and after the Great Depression. According to her granddaughter, Christine Chase, who helped bring this all together today, she spoke often about how much she enjoyed school but regretted leaving before graduating. Today, her dream of completing her high school career will come true. We would like to take this time to acknowledge her long life of learning, given I did ask her to, she wanted to stand for the entire time, and she wants to make a statement. So she has more energy than some of us.
I really loved school. It was never a chore for me. I was sad to quit school and go to work at Bradstreet, a collection agency. I loved my job and always made the best of the situation. Thank you for this diploma.
You know, and as you see, Mr. Brentley and the board members, And as you see, she has just as much energy as our recent graduates. She insisted on walking through the line. So given under the seal of the Pittsburgh Board of Public Education, they would like to present her with an honorary diploma this Wednesday, September 25th, 2013. Congratulations and best wishes in the future. Thank you, and this concludes our presentation for the evening.
Thanks, Heather. There's plenty of seats.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Ms. Hobson, and thank you each very much. Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley. Here. Mrs. Khaleesi. Here. Mrs. Fink. Here. Mrs. Hazuda.
I'm over here tonight.
Dr. Holly.
Present.
Mr. Eisler.
Present.
Mr. McCray.
Here.
Mr. Sumter.
Present.
Mrs. Shealy.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to educating all children to their highest level of academic achievement. We are providing a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees. We're committed to providing efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators. We are committed to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. And last but not least, we are committed to improving public confidence and encouraging strong parent-community engagement in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Would everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, deletions, or additions? Mrs. Azuda.
I have a question on the minutes. Under new business, Mr. Brentley had brought forward a resolution for the urban impact to work on a baseball field at Martin Luther King, and there was some confusion regarding ownership of the field and the extent of the work. There were 4 yes votes, 2 no votes, 1 abstention. So with 7 present, 4 makes a simple majority of 7. So I don't understand why that's considered a loss. Is it because it's real estate, or?
Was this for the donation of services
Yes.
or for something to affect real property?
It was a donation of services to affect real property. Is that why? Because it affects property?
My understanding was that there was 8 present and that it didn't pass because it wasn't a simple majority after talking with Mr. Weiss. But if there were 7 present and there was a majority vote, then I'll have to review what the actual motion was.
I mean, I would be happy to bring it up again under new business because I voted no, but I just didn't understand why this went down as defeated.
Well, the simplest thing, I wasn't present at the last meeting, so it's hard for me to say why it was defeated at the time without knowing more about the motion. The simplest thing to do today would just be to bring it back by somebody who voted no,
so
or
I
who
can
was
do that.
absent can,
Okay, so I will gladly do that.
absolutely, it can be
Thank you.
reconsidered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Are there any other questions, corrections, or deletions in the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Eisler and Khaleesi. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Mrs. Kramer, I would like to abstain. At this time, I would like to read the executive session statement. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of August 25th, 2013, the board met in executive sessions on September 18th and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. Finally, at the executive session immediately before this legislative meeting, the board discussed student discipline cases that involve violations of various portions of the Code of Student Conduct. The board does not vote at executive sessions. Dr. Lippert, do you have the numbers? Okay. I will give it to Dr. Lippert. Please turn to page 18 of the report so that Dr. Lippert can provide the numbers.
Can you give us just a second? I don't currently have the numbers. We can get those numbers. We actually don't have them currently.
So,
I'm sorry.
can we move on to discuss the items that we need to discuss in education? We cannot hold a vote until we get the numbers. We cannot hold a vote until we get them. So at agenda review, I'm sorry, there were, I think, 2 items specifically pulled for additional discussion. Item number 27. Oh, I'm sorry, is removed from the agenda. I think the first one is item number 34, requesting approval to move Pittsburgh Westinghouse into District 7 of the WPIAL next year. Are there any comments or questions on that item?
Could I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry. I had one correction before we move into the actual questions. Can I do that now, if that's okay?
Yes, please. I'm sorry, Dr. Lippert.
Okay. If I could have you turn to page 14 of 18 in the Committee on Education. We need to make a correction to item number 37, which is the donation from the Pittsburgh Pirates to Pittsburgh Spring Hill K-5. I'll wait till everybody gets there. Okay, so we should be on page 14 of 18, item number 37 at the bottom of the page. The first 2 sentences, which would be the first 4 lines, we're going to cross out the first 4 lines, which are the first 2 sentences, and I'm going to read revised sentences. Okay? We're going to replace the first 2 sentences with the following. Resolved that the Pittsburgh Board of Education authorizes the district's proper officers to accept a donation of $40,000 from the Pittsburgh Pirates to Pittsburgh Spring Hill K-5 as part of the festivities surrounding the Pirates' annual Roberto Clemente Day. The donation includes 2 class sets of 35 iPads and 2 sync stations, books for the library, and a library cart. And that would be the correction. I just wanted to note for the public that the original item actually was $20,000, so there's actually more of a donation than what we originally anticipated at agenda review. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lippert. It's in business. Item 34 is on the table for discussion. Pittsburgh Westinghouse 6 through 12, associate member of District 7, WPIAL football for the 2014-15 school years from Student Services. Any questions, comments, discussion on this item? Mr. Sumter.
This item would have our Pittsburgh Westinghouse Academy football team leave the City League and move to District 7 of the WPIAL. The major concern I have is that it may start the demise of the City League. There is merit in having or being a district in and of ourselves, which we are District 8. Because of that, all of our teams, either in District 8 or whichever level they qualify for, would have automatic spots in state playoffs. By moving out of the district, or if we didn't have a district in and of our own, that possibility, it may or may not occur. Having our own district is a guarantee of going to the state playoffs. Not having a district, it's whether you win or lose. So the concern I have, even though I understand the safety concern of playing schools that are of like size or like members on the team, I don't know that this would necessarily rectify that situation. So the concern I have is basically for not leading to the demise of the City League. However, the experiences that I've seen so far where in football, we're not as competitive as we probably could be or should be in noticing some of the games that have been played already with WPIAL teams, and it doesn't matter on which division you're in, there's a difference in approach towards sports in the WPIAL where you have community teams or city teams with maybe one high school, and the whole community supports that. And some of the most important decisions made in the smaller school districts with 4 or 5 schools is who's going to be the football coach. Whereas we don't have the same criteria for hiring coaches. We don't have the same, I would say, maybe preparation or support for athletics as smaller schools but larger communities, whereas we're supporting 7 high schools and all the other communities are supporting 1 high school. So whether or not this rectifies the competitive edge or that, I'm not certain of at this point. It may lead to perhaps consideration of maybe a board policy would say how many players should be on a team to compete in football down the road, or keeping that in mind because there's other schools within Western Pennsylvania that are facing the same situation of not having enough players to compete. And it's a hardship on those schools or any team that doesn't have enough players to compete in football. You need at least 11 for offense, 11 for defense, and folks to come in and play and take their place, because football is the nature of the game is folks will get injured. So you need a full complement of participants before you should even get on the field, because other than that, you're putting children in harm's way by having too few players, having them play both sides of the ball and play when if they had a full complementary team as far as enough players, that may or may not come about. So I don't necessarily see moving from District 8 to District 7, whether that's going to really address the concern of not having enough players and whether those players are put in harm's way because of that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other discussion? Mr. McCray?
I'm just curious, do we have any idea how many hours of instruction time the children will lose by going outside of the city, their city limit team?
I currently don't have that information, but I'm sure we could figure it out based on their game schedule.
I've seen Perry lose like 6 hours last week alone on their football team, so and they're going outside of the city now, so it's going to be even worse. So.
Can someone tell me where will they play? Will they still play their home games at Couples Field?
I did talk to Dr. Lane prior to tonight's meeting, and she did indicate that there was a request for home games to be played at Westinghouse, but I'm not sure if a decision has been made whether they would still have their games at Couples or whether we would move them to Westinghouse.
Any other discussion on item number 30? Mr. Brentley?
Yeah, I just want to take a second to give folks just a quick overview. First of all, I just believe that the athletic program needs a complete overhaul. Over the last 8 years or so, we've watched the previous administration cut things up, add things, change qualifications on what kids can go to what school to be a part of what team. And it's almost as if everyone was kind of doing their own thing. I support this item as the chair of the representative for District 8. And the reason why I support it is that it was supported and recommended by, I believe, the coaching staff there. So I'm supportive because they are supportive, but it requires our athletic department, along with a lot of other things in this district, needs a complete overhaul, needs a complete set of new eyes to look at how we have it set up. For instance, I remember the issue with UPrep. UPrep is 2 or 3 other schools can qualify to play. We still have 1 or 2 schools that are out that I don't know if they have an assignment to where they can play. And so there is no consistency. And so I support it because they support it, but I'm hoping in the very near future with new board members coming on, many of them, I believe all of them are here, and with a new set of eyes and a willingness to reach out to the community to find out what the best recommendation would be for this district and for its athletic programs. And I think we can come up with something that should work. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Azuda.
Does anyone know how long of a commitment we have to make if we join? If Westinghouse goes to Whitfield, how long do they have to stay at Whitfield? Is it 2 years? Is that what?
Just, for some reason, the sound is not really good in here tonight. I'm just going to repeat your question. Can you hear me? Sorry, it was the chatter that was killing. How many years of a commitment is it to move to District 7 for Westinghouse?
Delaware Allen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, 2 years.
Okay. My personal thoughts are that I will support this because the coaches are requesting it, and for 2 years we can give it a try. But I also agree with what Mr. Sumter had said. And judging by the football scores this past weekend, when you listened on Saturday, the majority of the games were blowouts. So moving into a division with smaller schools isn't necessarily going to ensure success. That said, I don't know why now that SciTech and UPrep both go up to 12th grade, why we don't look at restructuring that. But I will support this for tonight because they've requested it, but if it doesn't work out, I think that might be something we should be looking at.
Dr. Lippert, I'm sorry, Dr. Lippert, I know that you're taking notes. The third school in there is Obama. I think that arrangement was 3 schools. Mr. Brentley?
Just in closing for me on this issue is that one of the reasons why we're considering or entertaining moving them into another district or division is because we cannot forget over the last 7 or 8 years policies made at this board and redrawing of district lines and actually gutting Westinghouse is why we're doing what we're doing. Because if they were to stay in the city league, they're unable to compete. It is my understanding it was even difficult at one point for them to even field a team. And so for them to go up against somebody else, I mean, one of our city league teams, which can be perceived as one of the powerhouses, when you drop them down, I think they're supposed to be similar to weight size and that sort of thing. Listen, I'm following the lead on the coaches there. Everybody thinks that when our kids go off into different divisions or when they move on to different levels, and when we lose, we immediately say, we got to get our kids out of there, they can't compete. Oh, how unfair to say that. Our kids are capable, not only on the athletic side, but on the academic side as well. And so we have to allow them to get out there and feel and kind of learn. I believe the Westinghouse Association has been supportive of it as well. And so this is the reason why I would support it. If it is, as Dr. Allen suggested, it's a 2-year term, we'll have a wonderful opportunity to reevaluate in 2 years. Thank you.
Mr. Sumter.
I don't want to take too long in talking about this. Most of the points I've said already. The issue is number of players. And if they don't have enough numbers to compete in the City League, that's not going to change if they go to the WPIAL. Now, if they go to the WPIAL or in the City League, but have enough players, the issue is the number of players. The other thing is, some of our teams have already gone to the WPIAL in different sports. And I believe the only success we've had has been in swimming. Everything else we've lost. And even if we don't go to the WPIAL, if you just look at the scores from when we have played teams in the WPIAL this year, and some of our stronger teams in the city, as was already mentioned, when you see scores like 55-0, and these are your better teams in the district, then it's a matter of the level of competition to me is different in the WPIL, where you're hiring a coach, you're putting all the emphasis, you're pouring all the resources into football, and you have a city to draw from in most instances to field a team from. That's not the case in the City League. Being that it's 2-year period and can be re-examined, then you will know which way to go at that point in time. But my point would be more so that if you don't have enough players to field a team, you shouldn't even be in any league playing anybody, not in football. So, of course, we would have the time to look at reconfigurations of teams or have a better understanding of what we could do to field enough teams within the City League. It still may come down to we only have six teams. And they're comfortable with that in the fact that they will play home and away each other during the school year. That'll make up for the games that they wouldn't include Westinghouse in the schedule. So I'm only putting it out there to say that it's more to me of a policy issue or concern for the players' safety, not let's jump districts to try to win. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Thank you.
Mr. Brentley.
Yeah, Dr. Lippert, can you tell me, for Kappa High School, students can play where?
They play at their home school, which could be various schools.
Okay. So, I mean, they're not, as a school, assigned to a particular school as their eligibility?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, it may, hopefully not at this meeting, because it seems like this small issue will go on and on and on. But if someone can look into what would be the possibilities of assigning Kappa students to Westinghouse as their feeder for eligibility for sports. And that would solve a whole lot, because if Kappa this is like a school without, a home school, so to speak, or a group of students without a home school, that would allow another group of students to be eligible there, and then it also would help resolve some problems. So if somebody can look into that, I don't believe it's a big issue. I think it's a matter of a board recommendation and a board policy just to simply make any student that's interested can now be eligible to play on the Westinghouse team. I think, and actually, it's not one of my suggestions, it was suggested to me by folks from the Westinghouse Alumni Association, and they mapped it out where I think that was the only school left that's not playing on a bigger school. So if somebody can look into that, and if there is a possibility of a motion or something for the board to recommend it, if they would get back to us by next month, that would be very helpful for me. Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, we will move on to item. Go ahead, Mrs. Khaleesi. Item number 38. A new business, to amend a new business item, Committee on Education with New York University Metropolitan Center for Urban Education for Pittsburgh Perry High School in school performance, previously approved by the board on August 26, 2013. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Seeing none, go ahead, Dr. Holloway.
I asked to have this pulled because we didn't get any information on how well the organization actually implemented their program into the school last year. And I'm still waiting for the information to come to us for this particular program.
Dr. Hawley, in conversation with Dr. Lane, I know that we're still working on an actual report to share with the board, but I can share that both Dr. Otua and the principal, Nina Sacco, do feel as though the work there was beneficial last year. We have some anecdotal survey results that weren't in a complete report that we didn't want to share with you. But both the school principal and Dr. Otua recommended to Dr. Lane that they do believe that we should go forward. The proposal that supports this board tab does in fact include metrics around 10% improvement in their keystone exams, which are both algebra and literacy, and some other metrics that the group would be accountable for across their work would be a reduction of 10% in suspensions as well as the chronic absentee rate. So we do feel as though NYU is working with us, and we do make the recommendation to the board to continue with this.
You know, my problem is that I have no data to compare last year's efforts, how much effort was made with the students last year as opposed to the year before. There's actually nothing to compare, and there's no comparative data that I would use to support this. So I'm going to have to ask Dr. Otua to come to the mic and tell me why she thinks this program should come back to us.
We've already started the work this year with NYU and planning and setting the process in place for them to help us with attendance, discipline, and student achievement. So if we do not move further, that work will be over come September 30th.
Okay, but exactly, so you're telling me that you're having them because of the attendance. Did the attendance improve from 2012 to 2011-12 to 2012-13 in order to keep this program?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we've already started working with them this school year. We are still working on the report, like Dr. Lippert said, to get a comprehensive evaluation, but I'm not sure how effective that will be. But moving forward, we have a baseline data that we've shared with you, and we will be reviewing that data every 90 days, every quarter with them to make sure that we are meeting the targets that we set in order to meet the benchmark at the end of the year.
So in other words, you don't have any definitive answer as to why you really want to have this program again next year, other than you started the work for this year?
We know that at the beginning of the school last year with the merger of Oliver High School and Perry High School that we needed to get the discipline in place. They did help and support the school in putting in a discipline plan, which I was part of, and which they facilitated through retreats and through teacher groups. So we implemented that process second quarter last year. And that process was effective, that we did reduce discipline referrals and discipline suspension. And also we implemented the electronics policy last year, which we also started this year. So they were working with us and supporting us in putting those systems in place. So as we started what we ended last year, as we started that work this year, we know that we have data now to support what we're doing. So I will be able to share that data with you after 90 days.
So there's no data to share with us on this particular program for this year, from last year, which we spent a lot of money on. I know a lot of it was grant money, but it's still, it was a substantial amount of money. So we don't have any, you don't have any definitive data points to show us.
I think one of the things, Dr. Hawley, that you're asking, the answer in terms of translating to student outcomes, achievement outcomes, other than the discipline referral, the answer is no. The reason is because the first year of the program, the work was not based around student outcomes in the first year. It was around putting systems in place, such as a discipline referral system that wasn't there, around training staff members, around how do they have classroom management. So a lot of the first year was around systems and you know better than anybody that oftentimes in the first year of implementation, it's setting the systems in place. And so this year, one of the focuses of the work is now to link it to the student outcomes around the 10% reduction in suspensions, attendance, and then the actual academic improvement in the Keystone exams. So I think part of the issue is that we didn't link it in the first year to actual outcomes versus getting some of these systems in place, which is why we're having some difficulty with NYU producing the actual report to base it in outcomes.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just want to say I support this item, but I also want to make it very clear to Dr. Lippert as well as the administration. I am hoping that you are not tweaking or adjusting a different set of qualifications for this consultant to meet because there are questions raised. We haven't done it for a lot of the other consultants in the past, and this is pennies compared to what we spent on others. The reason why I say that, as a board member, been on this board for 15 years, I can't go everywhere at all times, so I kind of adopt one school, and Perry, of course, is a personal reason. I attended, family attended, et cetera, et cetera. And so what little time extra I have, I do volunteer up there. And it just needs a lot of work. You do not put a consultant in a building for a year, and then you say, work a miracle. And then you come back, and when there are no measurables, you then cut his or her dollars, and very few people can measure something in a year's time. And so at the end of this year, which would be the second year, and I'm not sure if we are committing the same dollars that were committed to the first time. You can't expect this consultant to come in nationally known and to clean up something we made mistakes with at this board for free, and then put some ridiculous measurements out there. When he or she don't make it, and then we give him a bad evaluation, say it doesn't work. Look, we've made quite a few mistakes with closing schools, combining schools, and the speed in which we combined Oliver and Perry is unbelievable because there are so many additional issues that all the students need. Just recently, it is my understanding there is still a little overtone of some neighborhood rivalries that can get very, very personal, which is so no consultant in the world can come in and operate at that kind of atmosphere. And so there are a lot of dynamics going on there. And so I am just one to tell you, I can't tell you anything about the other consultants, but I can tell you their presence, and I can tell you what some staff are able to go and to pick their brains on certain things. Just having a different set of eyes there to help read the board, so to speak, of what's going on is valuable. And we should treasure it. Yes, we should expect an outcome. Yes, we should hold some to standard, but don't do anything different here that you haven't done to any of these consultants. And we got pages of consultants that run in and out of this district, and we have never tried to lay anything on them. And so I just want to say that I'm supportive. I wish I had more time. I do not have the expertise that they have, and we can only hope that it will help. But it's just a massive thing. And besides that, I don't like it when we make these mergers and then we kind of leave the staff out there after you allow them to have access to something. See, really, I believe that his services should extend to Westinghouse as well. Major issues at Westinghouse. And so you have to find the time. And remember, because some of these conditions are so bad, we're not in the business of not saying, no, you get this one and this one. No, they need help in every area. And so that's my concern. I just wanted to share that. I am supportive of it, and I hope the administration continues to work with them and allow them to do it. But don't make them miracle workers. They can't come in 2 years and clean up, a terrible decision that we made to merge things without doing our work to make sure that it was going to fit right. So thank you.
I just want to be very clear. I'm about results. And the children in that school, since we are now putting every child on the north side into one high school. I am very concerned about the school not having what it needs and making sure that all of the funds that we use for that school is going to produce some results for the children. An exorbitant amount of money was spent on this last year. I supported this wholeheartedly last year, and I'm supporting it this year only because of the principal and her desire to want to help the children in that building, so, and the staff. So I want to be very clear that I hold everybody to the same standard. And to be very clear, I also was very supportive of this particular group coming into this district. But under no circumstances am I going to stand back and say, well, it didn't work, oh, well, we're just going to give people another contract. I don't do that. I want to see what the outcomes were, and I want to make sure that the children in that school get what they deserve. And that's just Regina. So.
Seeing no other discussion on item number 38, are there any other items in the Committee on Education, let me finish, that anyone would like to ask questions about or make comments on? Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I raised questions at the agenda review, and I'll raise them again on page 11 of 18, number 28, and that is the Memorandum of Understanding with the 8+ organization, the Parent Nation Initiative Equity Office. And it sounds like it's a wonderful thing, but my concern is the question of the bigger citywide equity, or the term we often use as transparency. And are we applying it, or are we just using it as talking points? 8+ has been very, very active in the district, active to a point where we have, in my opinion, neglected others who have also wanted to serve and to volunteer. And so I think that we should kind of look at ourselves as parents of the city's children, and raising children. We should not be selective in how we pick certain people to help us who are good and well-intended. And that's what we're doing here. 8+ has been very, very supportive, but they've also had, first place royalties for years. We do different things with them, that we've advertised with them, we partner with them, they call for a meeting, we're there with our presentation. But at the same token, there are many, many others. There is, as I mentioned before, the chair of this nation's largest and oldest civil rights organization, Dr. Marilyn Barnett, who is the chair of the Education Committee of the NAACP. I was there years ago, and she said, I want to help. I'm retired, a former employee as well. We did not engage her and did not allow her. There is the Penn Group, Pittsburgh Interfaith, Interactive Impact Network Group. I mean, a real slice of Pittsburgh along racial lines, gender line, and religion. And we do not come in and allow them to do these kinds of things. And so I will not be supporting, and I'm encouraging my colleagues to do the same until we can develop something that would determine that we have one set or one kind of memorandum of understanding, and we apply it across the board. That's for any and everyone who wants to help. I believe that everybody wants to help. I believe that they're all concerned about the children of Pittsburgh Public Schools. But we as a board cannot get into a position and of favoritism and pitting one over the other. So I'm asking my colleagues that if we do nothing else but not support it, but come back next month with something that would be all-inclusive, and I think that we would we'd be able to make a lot more friends by not being selective, or as some say, we treat some as if what they are offering is more important than what the others have to offer. And I never want to put myself in that position. Everybody has something to offer to this district, and we should find a way to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Thank you. It is on this.
Mrs. Khaleesi, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but does anyone have any other comments or questions or discussion on 28? Okay, go ahead.
That was where I was going to go, and I apologize I was not here for agenda review, but before I make any comment, is there something wrong with our sound system that we can maybe correct? Because it's really whistling bad here. Yeah, the feedback is annoying, to say the least, but I'll continue while that's being taken care of. So I do have a couple of questions on this A-plus memorandum, but before I do that, I'd like to make a comment about the PIN. PIN asked new board members that are expected to come on in a few months to sign something that says that they will not close any schools, where elected officials do not answer to any organization, they answer to the taxpayers and the voters of this city. That is like, A-plus never asked anybody to do anything of that sort. So that has me a little bit upset, because you have an obligation, once you are sworn in on this board, to be respectful of what your duty is as an elected official, and who you answer to, and why you have the job you have. For any organization to ask anybody to make a promise that they can't make is a line that I think is incorrect for them to have even asked people to do. But it's can't be held to it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if I could ask a few questions on the A-plus memorandum, could somebody tell me how were the schools selected, please?
Yes, some more information. I was able to get some more information after agenda review to provide some clarification to the board. A-plus received a $1 million grant from the Heinz Foundation that is over a 3-year period. So this is actually the first priority set of schools, and the vision is to add up to 9 to 10 schools as the 3-year process unfolds. So this is the first set of schools. The schools were prioritized based on the community where students come from. So the Hazelwood community is the priority focus, and the Hazelwood students, unlike other neighborhoods in our district, actually go to the 5 schools: Greenfield, Mifflin, Minadeo, Montessori, and Sarrett. And so that population, because it's unique in that it does span out over those 5 schools, and also has a underserved parent representation in the school's parent organized groups like PSCC, the PTA, the PTO. That's one of the reasons why the Hazelwood community and the schools that their children go to were the first priority schools. And the vision over time in year 2 and in year 3 would be to look at other high poverty schools and add some more schools over time. In the term of the schools that are prioritized, Greenfield, Mifflin, Minadeo, Montessori, and Starrett, there had to be some criteria in place. So all of these schools have to have a well-established parent organized, already organized groups, including PSCC, PTO, PTA, EFA representation, Title I representation, and the second thing is the willingness of the principal to be involved and the willingness of the parents to be part of this in partnership and also be trained. So it was actually prioritized based on the community and the schools where the students go in the community, and the vision again is to add other schools over the course of the next 2 years.
So did I understand you correctly saying that the principals are in favor of this memorandum?
It's one of the prerequisites or criteria. So they identified a community, the Hazelwood community, and looked at where the students in that community actually go, which brings up the 5 schools that you're asked to approve tonight as kind of the first year focus. And the principals in those schools have expressed interest in working, as well as their parent groups already in there. If something happens, let's say Mifflin or Minadeo, for example, decides that they can't commit to the training obligation, then they would move to another school outside of the Hazelwood community. But the first priority was to really focus on that community.
Okay, and then you mentioned that the PTOs, PTAs, PTGs, PSCCs, they are in agreement with this thing.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So knowing that there is a specific PTA where I know there's an issue, I hate to put you on the spot, Dr. Lippert, I really do, and I apologize, but I'm concerned. There's a serious issue in one of our PTAs, and my concern would be, how was that PTA's commitment or addressed? How was that addressed? How was that one? I mean, I hate to be specific. I don't want to be specific on which one. I'm trying to be.
I think, well, this applies to all of the schools, not specifically the one you're speaking about, but there's been pretty clear criteria around who is responsible for developing the budget to support activities that the parent group wants to lead, who actually makes the final decision on money that would support teacher training as well as their program, and no one individual is responsible for receiving funds and or making the decision to use those funds.
Okay, and then my other question is, can any of these schools pull out if they want to?
The answer would be yes.
Okay, and what do they have to do to pull out? Do you know?
I can confirm, but essentially it would be through the principal. The principal would notify A-plus schools, and we would remove the school, and then we would look to replace with another school in the first year.
Okay, and Montessori is not a feeder school of Hazelwood. How did Montessori get chosen?
I don't have the actual number, but the students from the Hazelwood community do attend Montessori, and again, the students' parents of the Hazelwood students are underrepresented, can't speak tonight, on any of the parent-led groups in the school.
I'm holding you. If they want to pull out, they're going to pull out. Thank you.
Are you on that item still,
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Now that we know that it was the Hazelwood community that you were trying to support in parent engagement, my question is, why wouldn't you use the schools, all of the feeder schools that the children have to attend, such as the children from Minadeo? They would then go to Sterrett, that would be their feeder school, and then the feeder school then would be Alderdice. So those two schools were actually left out of giving that type of support. Do they go to?
I'm sorry, I thought Sterrett was in.
Is Sterrett in there?
Yeah. Sterrett is in.
If
So
I could-
then why didn't they go to the high school, which was Alderdice?
I don't have that answer, but we can go back and actually look. Just to repeat the schools again, so everybody's clear, it's Mifflin, Minadeo, Montessori, Sterrett, and Greenfield. And I can follow up on, if we could actually consider, moving a high school in there as well.
And my reason for the high school is because that's where typically parents really start to, the children take care of it. But that's where we really need the parents to become more involved and stay involved once they get into the high school area. So I was wondering, and do some of the students also attend Brashear from Hazelwood?
I'll have to
I don't
look,
know.
but it's
Not anymore?
a great
Okay.
suggestion to try to have a K-12
Okay.
in the first year. You know what I mean? From where kids go K-5, middle school, and high school. So we'll take a look into that. Thank you.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Thank you. Still on that, will somebody please provide for me tomorrow how many students from Hazelwood actually attend Montessori? If I could get that information, please.
Yes, we'll follow
Okay.
up.
And could you also provide for me in the board update which ones have, each of these schools have PTOs, PTAs, PTGs? I want to know specifically which
Yep.
ones.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other, Mrs. Khaleesi, I'm sorry. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Point of order on item number 34, where we're talking about approving Westinghouse, Pittsburgh Westinghouse Academy 612 becoming an associate member of District 7. This vote is an advisory vote to the PIAA District 8 committee. They're the ones that make the final vote on whether it is to move to the WPIAL. When it first came up, we felt that this issue should come before the board and recommended that it come before the board for a board vote. So this vote recommends, or at least shows the position of the board on the issue before the PIAA District 8 committee votes on it. I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote on this. Vote your own conscience. And I think either way we go, the trial way may be the best way to go, even though I might not support that. But just to let you know the particulars and the procedures of what this vote really is about. Thank you.
Any other items, comments, questions on the Committee on Education? Seeing none, can I please get you to turn to page 18 of 18, item number 41? "18 students were suspended 4 to 10 days. 0 students suspended for 4 to 10 days and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. 1 student expelled out of school for 11 days or more. 0 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school." Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call? The entire package.
Okay, on the packet, I'm sorry. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Brentley?
Yes on the report. I'll be voting no on page 19, 28A.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes on the report as a whole and no on number 34.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 34.
And Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Please turn to the report on business and finance that is before you. Dr. Lippert has a correction.
If you could turn to page 7 of 10. We're going to be making a correction to item number 18. Page 7 of 10, item number 18. The title of the item is McGraw-Hill Education for Imagine It. And we are going to be changing the amount and also the fund line. So I'm going to read that sentence to you. The cost of this action shall not exceed $45,000 from account line 4600 010 1100 640. Thank you, Mrs. Shealy.
You are welcome, Dr. Lippert. Are there any comments, questions, discussion on any items in the report on business? Mrs. Fink. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I start up here? Mr. Brentley, did you have? Go ahead, Mr. Brentley.
Yes, Mr. Joseph, can you just explain to me page 8 of 10, number 20, in easy-to-understand terms?
Okay. So this is action that needs to be taken every time we sell a building to maintain the tax-exempt status of the bonds as we pay down the debt.
So what does this mean
Mr. Brentley.
What does this mean in terms of dollars?
So in terms of dollars, the resolution, I believe, let me go and pull that out. So in terms of dollars, it means that the outstanding debt of the Shenley building, which was $2.67 million, would be, we'd maintain the tax-exempt status on those bonds, and then the remaining proceeds can be either placed in a debt service fund or they can be used for our capital reserve.
So, Mr. Joseph, if you can just walk me through this again. We sold the building roughly, what, 5.1?
5.2.
Okay, thank you. And so the debt that was against the building is subtracted from the 5.2. That balance is what we have, and you're saying that we have an option of putting it against the debt service or whatever. What is that actual balance? And for lack of a better term, what is our walk away with money in pocket that we received from the sale of the historic Shenley building?
So our walkaway money that is available immediately would be about $2 million, so $1,994,398. That would be available to the district.
Thank you. I just want to say in closing that to the taxpayers, that is what a crime looks like. $2 million, when all the smoke clears, what we received for Shenley. Amazing that no one called this board on that. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. I will not be supporting this and will not be supporting any item coming forth with Shenley until we eventually get the full investigation as to how this ever happened and who were involved and what relationships did they have with maybe some in this building. You don't give away you don't give away an asset and walk away with pennies. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph, when does Shenley come back on the tax rolls?
It'll come back on tax rolls once the development is, well, it comes back in tax rolls effective immediately. We'll receive the full benefit once the redevelopment's completed.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Fink?
Now that we have changed item number 18, and the cost has gone up, what the new fund line for that is an 01 fund line, which is our mainstream budget. What was the fund of the original item? What fund was that?
That was actually the school site-based budget, and that was an error. It should have always been the budget line listed here. Well, actually, it was going to go under the KTO grant, and then we moved it to the general fund so that we could use the KTO monies for another purpose. But the fund line listed here was by mistake from the original item that you saw.
All right.
Any other questions, comments, discussion in the business agenda? Seeing none, Mrs. Kramer, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes on the report. I'll be voting no on the stealing of Shenley High School, which is page 8 of 10, number 20.
Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes, on the report as a whole, I'll be voting no on number 20.
Thank you. Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
Ms. Shiley.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. Please turn to the report on human resources that is before you that includes addendums A and B. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on this report? Mrs. Khaleesi.
Just want to express that we have some wonderful people that are retiring, and I would like to wish them well in their future. Dave Miller is one of the people there that has come to my home a million times to set up my technology, and God bless him because he's made of gold. So I wish everybody, everybody that is retired, I wish them all well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mr. Brentley, did I see your hand?
Yes, I quite a few to mention, but I also want to wish all that are retiring a wonderful, wonderful future. And I want to raise my white flag about the concern that we should have as we continue to see high-quality, dedicated employees exiting this district. And it should also be noted that this large school district has yet to develop a professional exit interview to at least peek into the minds of those who are leaving. What I've learned about a lot of professionals is that when they see things moving in a different direction that they're not able to support, rarely will they say anything. To some feel that it could destroy their career, and so they quietly exit. And we have not developed a system that would allow them some confidentiality and sharing with us on the way out the door why they are leaving. Is there something we can do better? How can we change? What would you suggest? Where do we go wrong? And so the only way you can get that real, brutal, open, honest response is you got to have an independent company or an individual who would be contracted with no ties to this board, no ties to Broad or Gates, and allow them to be filtered into this agency or company when they decide. Give them an incentive, give them a gift card or something if they would complete it. But we have to begin to ask questions. Why are good, high-powered, quality individuals leaving? And that goes for this month as well as over the last 7 to probably 8 years since we've made these major directional changes that have been proven to be a bad decision. So I would ask again, the administration would consider putting some kind of exit interview in place. No, you won't get everybody to praise you, but I would think that you would want to know where you're going wrong and what others think of you as they move on to their next phase in their lives. And then finally, I will be abstaining on this report. There are some concerns with a section of this report, and to not go through the concerns, it's best that I simply abstain until I can get a better understanding on a few of these items. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments on the report on human resources, Mr. McCray?
Always like to be last, but I do have one comment, actually goes back to business as well. We passed a self-insurance rate, and we're talking about breast cancer awareness. I want all employees to be aware that we do provide preventative insurance. That's what we discussed in the insurance end of it, and that's what we're discussing about in the breast cancer awareness. So I do think that that's a good time to mention it, that we, and Mrs. Azuda, it's not just breast cancer. There's awareness for everything that we can possibly make, just to make more healthy employees, more happy employees, and thanks to those employees that are serving the military for doing a good job. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. McCray. Mrs. Kramer, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley.
Abstain.
Mrs. Khaleesi.
Yes on the report as a whole. On page 18, number 4, I abstain.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes on the report as a whole. I abstain on page 16, number 2.
Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes on the report.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Report passes. Thank you.
Mr. Sumter.
Point of order, I'd like to amend my vote on the, I would like to
Sorry.
amend my vote on the business section.
Okay. What was the correction, Mr. Sumter?
This is my son.
Whichever item shown. Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 20.
Okay, the motion still passes. Thank you.
I would like to call the board's attention to the financial statement and report on controller, both dated August 31st, 2013. Are there any questions? Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Joseph, we've talked at every board meeting since the beginning of this fiscal year because of the reassessments in the county about how it was going to affect the school district budget. Our general revenues are down year to date. Can you give us an idea of where we stand for the year, what you anticipate, and if we are in a position as you prepare the next year's fiscal year's budget to talk about how the reassessments have affected our tax collections?
So for the year to date, we're about $10 million behind where we would be on a 12-month roll-forward basis. This is largely due to the appeals that have been happening and the erosion in the total assessed value of the district. Next month, I anticipate that we will be adjusting our revenue projections for real estate downward to correspond with, at that point in time, we would have received about, typically by September, we would have received about 95% of our real estate revenue, and we don't really receive that much more revenue throughout the final 3 months of the year. This will affect our projections going forward, which I will have to adjust downward our revenue projections going forward until such a time where we have our real estate revenues stabilizing.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Just 2 other quick questions. Are our expenditures down? Are we trying to keep our expenditures down also?
Yes, we are.
And our earned income tax, has it been negatively affected?
No, it hasn't. Our earned income tax is actually up.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Shealy. Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
You're welcome. And Mr. Joseph, please forgive me if you mentioned this. And Dr. Holly, could you turn your mic off, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Will you need to, this is not the best word, but it's the only one that comes to my hedge, as you set the millage for next year because of the uncertainty of real estate appeals?
So I think I know where you're going with this one, and the only ability that we have to hedge would be to utilize the index. We cannot exceed the index, so that would be the only ability that we would have to hedge. And based on the the substantial decrease in revenues, I strongly advise that we do hedge our millage against the loss in revenues.
So the appeal process has negatively affected the district's income?
Yes, it has.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joseph. Dr. I'm sorry, any other questions or comments on the financial statements? Dr. Holly?
I need to make an amendment to my vote. In the education section, I need to abstain on page 4, number 8. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. The motion still passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to call your attention to the new business items, and there are a plethora of them. For the children in the audience, please look up the word plethora. That's a good word to know. The first we will start with is a resolution for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and whereas breast cancer affects 1 in 8 women in the United States, and whereas breast cancer is second only to lung cancer and cancer deaths among women in the United States, and whereas breast cancer knows no boundaries with respect to age, race, religion, and socioeconomic status and affects everyone, not only the person diagnosed with the disease, and whereas support for research and treatment of breast cancer is of a paramount importance. Now therefore be it resolved as follows. The Board of Public Education hereby recognizes and supports Breast Cancer Awareness Month. All stakeholders in the school district are urged to support efforts to combat this deadly disease. Is there a motion? Mr. McCray and Mr. Eisler. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley.
Yes.
Mrs. Clazy. Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
And Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. Our second new business item of the evening. Resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh authorizes proper officers to make a payment to the Pennsylvania School Board Association. The board and the superintendent's office will be sponsoring an orientation September 24th, 25th, and 26th, 2013, for the potential board members who are slated to take office in December 2013. On September 24th and 26th, no cost will be incurred as PPS staffing will be providing the training. On September 25th, which is today, Pamela Price, PSBA, will be the main trainer for that day. The board and the superintendent's office will cover the cost of the one-day training fee of $850 plus travel expenses. The total payment amount shall not exceed $1,450 from account lines 0100 08R 2310 330 and 1000 010 2360 330. Eisler Khalazy. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I support this 100%, but I want to take a moment to kind of remind the public that in less than 3 or 4 months, we will have 4 new board members. And I got to tell you, it is interesting the kind of commitment, work, and time that these 4 individuals have put in already. No, they haven't paid me, did not pay me to say this, but I am speechless when I go to certain community meetings and they're there. When I go to other community meetings across town, they are there. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they are here tonight. And so I just want to ask if those potentially new board members, just raise your hand. And this is before anything happens, before you're sworn in. I got to tell you, as a board member who's been here for 16 years, I'm impressed at your commitment thus far to the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And I am hoping and praying that it will continue once you are sworn in. But the day that you're sworn in, which is the first Monday in December, we're already going to owe all of you some overtime pay already, because you've already overcommitted yourselves already, and it's a wonderful thing to do to our students. So before we get moving into anything else, I just want to say thank you so much, and we appreciate your commitment to the district before even being officially sworn in. Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, Mrs. Kramer, will you have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley.
Yes.
Mrs. Clazy.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink,
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda,
Yes.
Dr. Holly,
Yes.
Mr. Eisler,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Sumter,
Yes.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you. Mrs. Kramer, I think I need a point of order, because we've discussed this into my confusion. So I have 4 motions sitting in front of me. Am I reading one at a time? Or should I just, what am I doing?
Mr. Sumter, I believe, is going to make a motion. And then I will go around. This is for the PSBA offices. Mr. Sumter is going to make a motion authorizing the secretary to submit the votes electronically, and then I'll go around and record each board member's vote for each of the 4 offices. And I will read the names of the candidates and allow you to vote for each named candidate for each office. Okay?
I guess the attempt is for one motion to cover all 4 elections, even though they'll be done individually. I move that the Board of Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh direct its proper officers to comply with the bylaws of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to cast a ballot electronically for the following candidates for PSBA no later than September 30th, 2013. President-elect, Vice President, Treasurer, at-large representative for the West.
Mr. Brentley?
Oh, no. Wait. It's been moved and seconded. Don't we need discussion?
Discussion.
Well, no, we're going to just...
This is just to be able to, yes. There is no discussion on this? Okay. Mr. Brentley, Mrs. Khaleesi.
Mr. Brentley?
He said yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
This is just a motion for him to read.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I lost you.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Now I'm going to ask that each of you vote for each of the offices, and I'm going to start with the office of President-elect. The candidates for the office of President-elect of the PSBA are William S. Lakoff and Mark B. Miller. I will go around the table and ask each of you to vote for one named candidate.
Question. Mr. Sumter, you are the PSBA representative. Who are you recommending for this position? I know absolutely nothing about any of these candidates. Okay, it's right here. But secondly, can you tell me, out of the positions that are here, it appears that most of the ones we are recommending are all men. Is there a reason that you can share with us why there is no women representation in the recommendations?
The only thing I can say is that there was an endorsement committee, and candidates apply individually for each position. The materials that were passed out last week indicated those that were endorsed by the endorsement committee and those that weren't, but all the candidates that applied for each position are listed.
Okay.
And for each one, only one female applied out of all those positions. Now, there are at-large positions for other parts of the state, and there may be some women there, but for our end of the state, there was only one that applied for at-large position, but for the other positions, those are the individuals that applied.
Okay, and so what position is there a woman on this ballot?
The at-large position.
Okay, and that is our,
Yes, for our district.
that is the final vote that we would take today, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brentley, you have the floor to place a candidate.
I will vote for Mark B. Miller for president.
Okay, Mrs. Khaleesi?
Mark B. Miller.
Mrs. Fink,
Mark B. Miller.
Mrs. Hazuda,
Mark Miller.
Dr. Holly,
Mark B. Miller.
Mr. Eisler,
Mark B. Miller.
Mr. McCray,
Mark B. Miller.
Mr. Sumter,
Mark B. Miller.
and Ms. Shealy.
Mark B. Miller.
The board's vote for the office of President-elect shall be for Mark B. Miller. The next office that we will be voting for is the office of Vice President of the PSBA. The candidates for this office are Charles H. Ballard and Larry B. Breach. Are there any questions prior to me recording the votes? Okay. Mr. Brentley.
Charles Ballard.
Mrs. Khaleesi.
Charles H. Bellard.
Mrs. Fink.
Charles H. Ballard.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Charles Ballard.
Dr. Holly.
Charles H. Ballard.
Mr. Eisler.
Charles Ballard.
Mr. McCray.
Charles H. Ballard.
Mr. Sumter.
Charles H. Ballard.
And Ms. Shealy.
Charles Ballard.
Okay, the board's vote for the office of Vice President of the PSBA shall be for Charles H. Ballard. The next office that we will be considering is the office of Treasurer of the PSBA, and the candidates for Treasurer are Norman B. Hasbrook and Otto W. Voigt III. Mr. Brentley.
Otto Voigt III.
Mrs. Khaleesi.
Otto W. Voigt III.
Mrs. Fink.
Otto W. Voigt III.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Otto Voigt.
Dr. Holly.
Otto W. Voigt III.
Mr. Eisler.
Mr. Voigt.
Mr. McCray.
Otto W. Voigt III.
Mr. Sumter.
Sure.
Otto W. Voigt III.
And Ms. Shealy.
Otto W. Voigt III.
Okay, thank you. The board's vote for the office of Treasurer shall be for Otto W. Voigt III. The last resolution is for the office of At-Large Representative West of the PSBA. That's the regional representative, and the candidates for the At-Large Representative West are Daniel J. O'Keefe and Stacy Thompson. Are there any questions before I record the vote for At-Large Representative?
Yes, I'd just like to make the comment that PSBA is an acronym for the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, and how wonderful it would be if we had a policy that would make it mandatory in terms of leadership with women as well as men. I understand the political process and I support it, but when you're dealing with the women population, I'm sure in this city and in this state, is close to, if not over 50%, and nationally, I'm sure it is much larger than that, 51%. There is no way you can move with a ballot and not make it mandatory or encourage women into leadership. So, Mr. Sumter, who is our representative, I will be moving off of your recommended slate on this final vote to support the only woman candidate on the entire ballot, and that is Ms. Stacy Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
Mrs. Fink.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Daniel O'Keefe.
Dr. Holly.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
Mr. Eisler.
Ms. Thompson.
Mr. McCray.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
Mr. Sumter.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
And Ms. Shealy.
Daniel J. O'Keefe.
Okay. Daniel J. O'Keefe has received the majority of the votes, and the board's vote for the office of At-Large Representative West shall be for Daniel J. O'Keefe. Thank you, and the votes will be submitted electronically by the secretary as voted by the board. Thank you.
Just as a aside, so that we understand what just happened, this is the first time we've ever done this procedure. And the reason is they want more participation in the voting process, not just who shows up at the conference. So all school boards throughout the entire state that are members of PSBA went through this process. So you'll have a more representative vote on the officers, and it's not just based on whether you show up at the conference to vote then and there. The other thing is that the current president of PSBA is a female, minority female, Marcella Myers Diaz, I forget her name. But there have been several ladies that have been in the leadership role at PSBA over the years that I've been there, and I can think of 4 of past presidents within the last 8 years have been female. So it is represented, and the majority of regional directors that show up for the PSBA meetings are female. So just to not let people think that it's one-sided or the other, but is big female representation in PSBA. Now, there might not be a big minority representation, but there are females represented. Thank you.
You are welcome, Mr. Sumter. Mrs. Azuda.
Yes, last month when the item came up that I questioned in the minutes, I was not comfortable with the information that was presented to us and had hoped that it had been turned to the appropriate staff members to investigate and give us information in advance. So I had voted against it, not that I was against the concept and the work, but the lack of information. And so as a person who voted against it, I am able to bring it to the floor again. And so I would like to offer this resolution to my fellow directors. Resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh authorize its proper officers to accept a donation valued at $4,000 in the form of labor, materials, and design improvements to the Pittsburgh King Pre-K-8 ball field. This donation is made possible through the Baseball Tomorrow Fund operated by Major League Baseball, which granted Urban Impact funding to improve services, supplies, and facilities used by youth participating in Urban Impact. Pittsburgh Kings Ball Field is one of Urban Impact's sites for baseball programs for students. Resolved further that Urban Impact, through its chosen contractor, Sports Turf Specialties, referred to Urban Impact by the Pittsburgh Pirates, will provide the following improvements to Pittsburgh Kings Field. 1, professionally rebuild pitcher's mound to Little League safety specifications with clay, mix, and rubber, a value of approximately $1,000 to $1,200. 2, rebuild infield by adding several inches of infield mix and have it laser graded to improve draining and overall safety, $2,500 to $3,000, depending on how many truckloads of infield mix ultimately are required. Resolve finally that this work is provided free of charge, increasing the value and utility of the field. Pittsburgh Public Schools Facilities Department staff have met with Urban Impact representatives and the school principal to review and advise on plans for the field improvements. It has also been verified that all improvements will be on district property.
Second.
McCray provided the second. Mrs. Scalise.
Does the second have to also come from a, thank you.
No.
I would just like to say that as past president of the Beechview Athletic Association, I know how hard folks work to keep fields upgraded. And it's always a challenge on the city's city parks budget to do what they can. And being this is our field, that these folks are willing to come in and do the work is very commendable. And I want to publicly thank them for their support of our children in this neighborhood.
Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just want to say this is one of the many, many votes that I just wish I had a shield to like hide, because we're just out of embarrassment. To those in the viewing audience, if you watched last month's meeting, I presented it. The only thing that this agency wanted was a nod, a letter of support. Their money, their people, their personnel, that's all. And I think we went into a half an hour, 20-minute, full-blown out discussion because I submitted it. Here we are now doing the exact same thing last week that we could have done. So that was 30 days nearly 30 days of precious time that this nonprofit organization lost, that they could have had the field complete by now. There's an active group of kids, 90% of them are Pittsburgh Public Schools kids, that they are dedicated and committed to, and we went through an unbelievable, drawn-out discussion over it. I say that to say in the very near future, if folks are committed to children, do not get caught up on the messenger, but concern yourself with the message. The end of the day, the only thing they wanted was to do the field so that our kids would benefit from it. Don't get caught up on because I presented it or somebody else presented it, and we have to get super technical about it. So it is one of the embarrassing things that this board have to go through. And what's the total amount? $4,000. Thank you.
Mrs. Khaleesi.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I know you want to go home as bad as I do. But I cannot sit here and be treated as though we were doing something horrible last month when that's not the case. We weren't even sure the property was owned by us, which was the debate. Once that was clarified, we were clearly going to bring it forward again. It was simply a matter of making sure who owned what part of the property. We could not make a decision on property that we didn't own. I really don't care to have this discussion any further, but I think that the public needs to know. Now I want to put the mask in front of me because I'm embarrassed, because the reality of it is we did not know who actually owned the property, and we found out the property is shared by two public entities. Now that we know it, and we know who owns what and what we can vote on, we are doing what we were asked to do. So I don't think what we did was so terrible.
Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll? Mrs. Azuda.
Let me just say that maybe this can be a reminder to all of us that when the community reaches out to us to bring something forward to the board, to share it with the administration so that even if we're bringing it forward as new business, the administration has time to look it over, have questions answered. We would have known who owned the field. We would have known the scope of the work, which we didn't know last month. So maybe this could serve as a reminder to all of us that perhaps make a copy that you keep to bring it forward as new business, but as soon as it comes into your hand, give it to the appropriate staff members so that they can get all the questions answered that might come up, and we'll know exactly what we're voting for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Brentley.
I just want to just remind folks, because it looks like it's going to be another long, drawn-out issue here. Yes, it's helpful to do that, but remember, this board, and I've been here for 15 years, where we voted on items, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then retroactively, we come back after we spent it and already committed. Then we come back 2 or 3 months later, oops, we forgot to change the date, and we voted on it. This item was $4,000. It was going for the children in our district. It was a religious, nonprofit-based organization with a wonderful reputation. And so if there was any time that we could have kind of slid a little bit on some of our procedures, this would have been the case. All they wanted was a nod and approval so that they can get in there and simply do the $4,000 worth of work. I am learning. I have a 14-year-old, but this season, as we speak, is fall ball. So where fields are used nowadays. What was shared with me is the reason why we had to grab any and everybody, Mr. Brentley, is this money will run out or something. They wouldn't have access to this money until the end, past this month. So I think after September. You give, you breathe, and you can see for the public, you can clearly see that there's still anger at the fact that we simply blew it. It is for our children. You have to get past that. And yes, it was a clear, embarrassing move that we did last week. And let's hope that next time we put the children first, not the politics of this board. Thank you.
Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley.
Of course, should have voted for it last month.
Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
And Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Does anyone have any business that needs to come before this board for a vote? Seeing none, does anyone have any announcements? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I want to acknowledge an article that was in the city paper last month, and this was concerning a young man, Mr. Weller. Mr. Weller is a substitute physical ed teacher in the Pittsburgh Public Schools, but he is also an accomplished battled MC. What does that mean? That means these guys that go and battle each other into rap, and I don't know. I have to learn from Mr. Eisler and a lot of this stuff, you know, the rap and hip hop. I'm sure he's down with that. But this man is very, very good. He's in our district, and he's doing extremely well. And I wanted to suggest, and I'll give the article to the administration, that wouldn't it be a nice thing if we can find a way, because now, if I'm not mistaken, he is one of 4 that I'm aware of that's out there with that rap. There's the Wiz Khalifa, there's a Mac Miller. He does know
I
what
can
I told
help
you.
you, Mr. Brentley.
Okay,
I can
you're
help
right.
you.
You're right. He's the master MC. I keep forgetting. Okay. Okay. What that Mac Miller? I hear you. There you go. Well, listen, this is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for the district. There is Wiz Khalifa, there's the Mac Miller, and Jasiri X is nationally known. And, and there is a young man, and I should have his name, but somebody can research it. I know his first name is Jerome. He's a graduate of Perry High School about 10 years ago. He is a rapper in China. Because he speaks the language fluently. But he's from Pittsburgh, from Perry High School. And so if we can get the administration to kind of dream a little, wouldn't it be nice if we invited all of them to either do a PSA for our Pittsburgh Promise, or do a PSA, maybe a wake-up call that we can do on those robocalls to some of our kids who are having a problem getting up. They won't listen when we call or administration call, but if Jasiri X calls and put it together in a little rap, maybe it might work. And then find a way to tie in Mr. Weller. Now, he goes by the stage name of Real Deal, but I think he has a story. He attended and graduated from, I believe, Slippery Rock. He is in our buildings. He is teaching. And according to the article, he's pretty good with this freestyle. And if somebody can talk to him, can you do something that would maybe attract some of our students and kind of get them excited about education? So I'm asking that we dream a little and tie into those individuals. The last thing I wanted to mention was, it was a clipping, and I think I lost it already. The newspaper. Okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah, this was, I want to say thanks to sports writer Mike White from the Post-Gazette. September 13th, he wrote a little blurb about a former Perry High School player, Greg McGee. excellent student, and he's at Howard University. He's a quarterback. Howard is a Division I AA. Doing very well, and they wanted to give him some props for a good game that he had. And nevertheless, he is a former Pittsburgh Public School student. And Howard, of course, is an HBCU doing extremely well. And those are our students. And so we have to find a way to continue to acknowledge them and to continue to give them the props, because their stories could possibly turn around some of the students that may be on the borderline of dropping out, may be on the borderline of not giving their all. And so I wanted to share that with him, and congratulations to his parents and to all the teachers who touch all of their lives throughout the district. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Bruntley. I read that article also with great interest as a Howard University alum. And he actually has a brother who is Perry's quarterback, I believe, was said in the article. So they are two quarterbacks, and his great sorrow he mentioned in the article is that he doesn't get to come back and watch his little brother play as often as he wants because he's quarterbacking the Bison. So it was a nice article. Anyone else? Mrs. Fink.
You know, I can understand, as a board member of 34 years, I can understand why you would want to promote local people who have done well. However, and I don't know the last two fellows that you mentioned, but the first two was Khalifa and Mac Miller. They're pretty famous. I know who they are. I know what they do. And when we as educators start promoting and glorifying young men who preach the coolest thing is to get high on weed, and every other sentence in their songs contains the F word, I'm sorry, I think it's wrong. I don't think we should be promoting these people. Marijuana is illegal, and I don't want anything to do with any of the kind of glorification that seems to be going on around here for young people who have very different standards than we do.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Dr. Hawley.
Yes, I just want to say congratulations to the Pittsburgh Promise staff. This week we went to a very wonderful event where they told us gave us data on how well our Promise students are doing in college. As a matter of fact, we had 3 students there that are called Promise Scholars. One is attending Penn State. He's a former graduate of Oliver High School, and 2 young men from Obama International Studies. One is a freshman at the University of Pittsburgh, and the other is a freshman at Carnegie Mellon University. But what really stood out was the number of students that the Pittsburgh Promise has actually helped to go to college. And I'm just so pleased with the data that they showed. We can do better, and we should be doing better. But I was just so pleased to see the number of young people who have been supported by that scholarship and the work that they're doing in college. So I just want to say thank you to the Pittsburgh Promise.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Seeing none, may I please have a motion? Go ahead.
Excuse me, as always, we ask people to invest in our children's future and give to the Pittsburgh Promise, to NEED, the Negro Education Emergency Drive, and to the Homewood Children's Village. On October 3rd of this year is the Day of Giving, and on that day, whatever donations are made to the organizations who's submitted their portraits to Pittsburgh Gives and to that effort, will have a matching gift given there. So whatever you provide, the Pittsburgh Foundation will divide $750,000 among the different nonprofits and be able to match funds that are given on that day, and that's October 3rd. And it's in that 24-hour period only. Thank you.
Mr. Urso.
Thank you. I just want to reinforce what Mr. Sumter has said. I think the promise is phenomenal, and what these students are doing is phenomenal, but it is a lot of people who are putting a lot of money into this organization, and I think it's very, very important to thank them. The staff works very, very hard, but the donations are very, very important to keep the promise moving. And I think the other thing we need to remind people, and especially the business community in this city, that once these students graduate from college, we would really like to see them employed. I was at a recent event for Leadership Pittsburgh, and there was a young lady who was a graduate of the Pittsburgh Public Schools and of the Promise. These students are phenomenal, and they deserve not only our support for post-secondary education, they deserve our support to continue to live and work in this city. And I think that is a critical thing. It's not just post-secondary education. It's to make sure that they stay in this city and we benefit from their talents and their education. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
Yes, Mr. Brentley, just give me a second, please. Mr. Joseph, to keep people in the city, particularly young people, it's going to be important that you do the best you can with our budget.
Noted.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Brentley.
Yeah, you know, I just want to, and Jane, thank you for bringing that up, because I want to agree with you. You know what, and maybe let me rephrase that a little bit. I am familiar with the rap and the activities of one particular rapper that I mentioned, Wiz Khalifa. I am not promoting what he's promoting. But I'm a father of a 14-year-old that's forced to learn. And his national reputation, his international reputation, the merchandising, and the mentioning of his name, it has to bring you to your knees that he went to one of our schools. Now, I'm separating his anti-women lyrics, his N-word use, the promoting of the drug. I am separating, and that's a hard thing for me to do. I'm learning. I would normally just throw it all out the window. But I am learning with the 14-year-old. So you make a wonderful point. We should not be promoting anyone who promotes that kind of negative lifestyle that could play a negative role on our students. But we still have something to say about the success. I don't know how he was able to do it. This song 2 years ago, Black and Gold, what? Hey, Black and Yellow, what, you know.
Oh, my God.
Black, that's right. Black and Yellow. Hey, I don't look.
What's scary is that you know.
But it went, I mean, the thing was just, you know, it was just unbelievable. And so right now, you're looking at someone who's played a masterful role in marketing, his ability to do the gangster stuff and turn it on and off and still be able to do well. So thank you for raising that point. And I agree with you and stand with you 100%. I am not here promoting any of that. Now, the other ones I know about, the Mac Miller has been a very clean thus far, and I don't know, but I have to get to our rap expert a little later. But I can tell you about Jasiri
Come on,
X.
you know, I mean, Reynolds Market, we can do them all.
Who's that?
Blue Slide Park, Reynolds Market.
I don't know. I'm sorry. So, but anyway, thank you. I wanted to clear. I do know about Jasiri X, who is also a former employee of this district. Extremely positive music that he produces. So thank you so much, and I wanted to clear that up for the record. Thank you.
To adjourn.
Second.
I don't think we can we? We're good. Excuse me. I'd like to call the September 25th, 2013 meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit to order. Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley.
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink.
Still here.
Mrs. Hazuda. Dr. Holly.
Here.
Mr. Eisler.
Present.
Mr. McCray.
Still here.
Mr. Sumter.
Present.
Ms. Shealy.
Here.
Thank you.
Committee report on education is before us. Are there any questions, comments? Oh, shoot, sorry. Miss, can I ask for a motion so that we can get it on the record? Did you get all of that? All in favor? Opposed, same sign. I abstain. Thank you.
Motion passes.
Committee of Education is before you. Are there any questions, comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Kramer, may we please have a roll call?
Yes.
Mr. Brentley, yes. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. The committee report on business is in front of you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda.
Yes.
Dr. Holly. Yes. Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
The committee report on personnel is before us. Are there any questions? Mr. McCray?
Are any of these people coming back from, furlough?
No.
Seeing no other questions or comments, Mrs. Kramer, will we please have a roll call?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi. Yes. Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mrs. Hazuda. Yes. Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mr. Eisler.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
I wasn't ready for a motion. Thank you. So, just my last thing, I just wish and pray that we could have as much fervor and excitement about things like the purchase of biology materials for Keystone exams as we do about athletics. May I have a motion, please? All in favor? Opposed, same sign. This meeting is adjourned.